This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Jere and I are going to be joined appropriately by the president of APSCUF, which is the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculty. And also, you are also a professor at East Stroudsburg University doing political science. We can talk about that. So,
all right.
Welcome. Perfect timing. We are back to school.
Well, thanks for having me back again, Jere.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Great seeing you.
So, how is everything going with our state universities as we head back to school this fall?
Well, you know, this is a great time of year for faculty and for students. It's one of the most exciting things about being in higher education is that you start anew every semester and every academic year, and I know that my colleagues are very much looking forward to being refreshed with a new group of students who have graduated from high school and are looking to start their college careers. So it's very exciting, and I think there's exciting things happening too.
Well, this is the time of year when football starts, and right now every football team is number one because they haven't lost any games yet. But you hear a lot of cheers, and we're leading the nation right now. We are number one, or number 50, number 50 in student debt, and that's just phenomenal. And those are based on numbers from 2017. In 2016, we were the second worst, but now we're dead last.
Right. So, I mean, I think, it's those single stats sometimes don't tell the entire story of everything. So, in Pennsylvania, we have two universities which really drive up that cost. Penn State and Pitt are pretty expensive, and they're considered for the purposes of collection of data as public universities, even though we in Pennsylvania consider them quasi-public universities. For the purposes of the data, they're considered public universities. And they kind of drive up those costs when we look at the overall expenses. Having said that, a university education is increasingly expensive. Increasingly, the burden is being placed on students to pay for that education. We continue to see that the Commonwealth has not kept up as far as funding to the university system, to our university system.
Which would keep tuitions lower?
Which would keep tuition lower. I know that this year there was an increase of 3.5% to our universities, and Penn State and Pitt and Temple and Lincoln, they all got an increase as well. I know that some of those universities were able to keep their tuition flat. Ours, though, and our tuition is much lower than theirs is, so we have, an increase in tuition doesn't add up to quite the same amounts of money, but nevertheless, we're looking at about $7,500 for tuition. And if you look at the average of our universities, it's over $8,000 because of the different tuition models that they put into place. And that just covers the tuition. It doesn't cover the fees and the increasing housing costs as well. So a college education is a very expensive thing. Having said that, though, it is still a good deal. Like over the course of your lifetime, study after study after study shows you're going to benefit from a college degree. You'll make up that debt. But I do think that we're hurting not just a generation by having those increased costs and burdening their lives in ways that previous generations have not been burdened. But I also think we're hurting our own economy as well, because when students have that much debt, they're obviously not spending. They're not putting money back into the economy in the way that they were. And I also think it hurts disproportionately certain areas of the Commonwealth too. So in those regions of the Commonwealth where we do have some universities, but they're in poorer areas of the Commonwealth, every time that increase goes up, it disproportionately affects them. You have fewer students who are able actually to afford to be able to go to school. So when we're looking at schools like Mansfield and Clarion and Edinburgh and California, we're looking at regions where, in fact, it is quite expensive, and for those students, I think it's a bigger burden.
Right, and for the state legislators who are responsible for increasing that giving, it's great that they were able to give some, but I think we do need to look at it as a workforce development tool, because your 14 colleges and universities now are spread throughout the Commonwealth, and as you pointed out, a couple of them are in regions where we need more workforce development. The jobs that are out there for our students that will make it up, 2-3 times by going to Mansfield, they need to be supplemented now, in order that we can, reap that later. Isn't that true?
Absolutely, and and I think there's a lot of things. My colleagues tend to focus on the academics because, by nature,
it's their job.
That's what their jobs are. But there's room even within the academics to appreciate both our relationship with businesses in the Commonwealth, but also to look at a college education and what does it mean. It hasn't escaped our attention that as certain jobs have changed over the years, become more technological, require different skills like math and the rest, perhaps we need to rethink what it is that we're doing and the degrees that we offer too. So it's, even when you look at a job like auto mechanic now, it requires so much knowledge that we ought to be thinking, are we moving to a place where you should perhaps be able to get a Bachelor of Science degree, in that with some business skills and other skills too, in order to be able to both educate the population and do our jobs, benefit, I think, businesses as well when we look at machinists, which again is another skill that has become much more complicated. And particularly at those universities where we've seen some decline in enrollment, right? It makes all the sense in the world to be looking at what is it that you're doing, what surrounds you. Are there career technical centers that the high schools have? And if they're not there, can you fill in and help even at the high school level to do some of those roles? So I think that there's a lot of exciting things that are out there. We haven't talked about it for a long time, but there's some room for some economic development zones too, particularly at these universities, which are in regions of the Commonwealth where, again, there's a real need to bring business and industry there. And if we start to look at our universities as what they are, which are really, resources, instead of looking at them as a drain, but to look at how can we maximize the degree to which they're resources.
It's best to use those universities to take care of the gaps that are there between high school and the job site. So that's another burden that you have that then ups the costs of amount of time and what you can do. So yeah, you're a great resource that really should be recognized more.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, and I think people are wrong when they tend to look at it as sort of like a zero-sum situation. If you talk about technology, then you're ignoring humanities. That's not true. If you're running things appropriately, there's room for everyone, right? Nobody ever complains. I don't think they do complain much if there's a philosophy department, foreign languages at a university has got 100,000 students. That's blossoming, right? It's when things get tight that we start to look for what are we going to shed. And so I do think that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and and even in the humanities, you were talking about that, and I mentioned philosophy, which might get a bad rap for things, but philosophy majors get jobs, and they get jobs.
I loved philosophy.
Well, they get jobs specifically if you look at what skills are required in philosophy, right? Think critically, write well.
Exactly.
Plato had a lot of good ideas and a lot of good points that a lot of people have forgotten today.
But even as far as training and skills go, you're getting the kinds of skills that actually, if you look at what CEOs are saying,
it's the way you think.
Those are the skills that they say they want in employees. And that's sometimes the bad rap that the liberal arts and humanities get, because unlike other fields, you can't always show the direct path to what the job is. But the bottom line is, if you have a college degree, and this bears itself out in studies that are shown, if you get a degree and you're ambitious and you look for jobs, there are a lot of opportunities. It may not be the exact thing that you thought you were going to do, but you'll get a job and you will do well over the course.
You probably have 20 jobs by the time you're finished.
You might.
Your students now might have 20 careers.
You might. Things change rapidly, and that's one of the benefits of getting a degree in the liberal arts and the humanities, is that you are adaptable, and you know how to think critically, and you have skills that are transferable from one position to another position.
There is some good news out there, and believe it or not, it's not all about the debt, but parents have been surveyed and asked whether, even though there's a, it's a rising cost and everything, whether they still view college as a good investment, and overwhelmingly they do, which is, it doesn't help, reduce the debt, but at least there's support behind sending kids to get degrees. And
over the years, we've consistently seen that the students who go to our universities, that their parents looking into the future, understand that it is a good investment for them. I sometimes, I cringe a little bit when I hear sometimes some business leaders saying, oh, you've got to direct students away from college to go and to explore other options. Well, I think we ought to leave it up to the students about what they want to do with their lives, but we need to present all the options to them. They need to make wise choices, but certainly any student who meets the admission standards for a university should have the opportunity to attend that university if it's a public university, right? So it should be affordable. They should have that opportunity, because I think that parents know, they may not know the exact statistics, but they know deep down the impact that a college education has on someone's life. That, again, they are likely to make more money, much more money over the course of their lifetimes. And on top of that, they're likely to have a different view of the world. If you've gone through that college experience, if you've been challenged, widen your horizons as well. And we think it even has, impacts for, even if you don't wind up in college in a career, if you're just rearing children, like, it makes a difference that you've had various different experiences.
It's a great asset, that you present to the Commonwealth and all the families here. But a lot of times when people look at it, they look, oh, I want the very best, for my child, rather than looking at the long haul. They look at different colleges, universities that aren't related to the government, and the fact that as government, legislators don't want to have advertising, don't want to do those things. So you're taking a back seat to that. So we're happy you're on today. So our show goes all across the Commonwealth, that they can see that this is really a great asset and a great deal for families that they don't get to see, because the legislators don't want to have you spending money on advertising as these other colleges do, that spend more of your money on advertising than teaching as you do. Right.
So I think that those people ought to talk to our alumni, and if you spend time on our campuses and if you talk to the alumni, what you'll understand, what everybody will understand, is that the story of our state system is actually the story of success. That on every single one of our campuses, there are amazing things happening. Students are learning, students are succeeding, and whether that's at our largest school, Westchester, or at the smallest school, Cheney University, we have students who are doing well and moving on, and that's why this is such an exciting time of year, because we see these students coming in as high school students, and we know that they're going to leave being successful.
Well, in our last minute, I can't believe we're already down to our last minute. You work a lot on college affordability and student debt. What else are you interested in as this school year starts?
Well, I do want to mention the Pennsylvania Promise, and this is something that has been introduced in the legislature, which tries to make college more affordable, particularly for those families who are below $110,000 a year. It'll impact, it would impact students going to the state-related universities, students who go to our university, students who go to community college. And what we really want to do and what we like to see is, let's start having that conversation. We know we may not be successful in getting this legislation through, but we also know that it benefits everyone, and it even benefits students who wouldn't qualify for this program, because if more students were going to the universities, if they were higher enrolled, obviously their fixed costs get to be covered by more students, and that way they could keep their tuitions down.
That's great. Well, we want to thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate the conversation. We look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Yes, thank you so much.
And we will see you next time on Behind the Headlines.